Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so delighted to introduce my guest today, Elaine Bennett. Her name may sound familiar, but she is an award-winning speechwriter and definitely not the lady from Seinfeld, whose last name was Bennis. This Elaine is a strategic messaging consultant advising clients from Fortune 50 CEOs to entrepreneurs on their messaging. She also creates and delivers trainings on how to improve the writing of everything from internal communications to speeches. Her 2019 TEDx talk tackles the topic of how language can change the world. She began her career on Wall Street 25 plus years ago as a speechwriter for the CEO of Salomon Brothers. When scandal forced the executive to resign, Warren Buffett stepped in as interim CEO and Elaine's newest client. Mr. Buffett offered Elaine one of his highest compliments. You have a terrific ear and you turn straight thinking into straight writing. And that's what she's been doing ever since, melding the mind of a business person with the sensibility of an outsider to tell complex stories in a sophisticated but relatable way. Or as another client put it, Elaine is the Obi-Wan of speechwriting. Please join me in welcoming Elaine Bennett. Hey, Elaine.
Hey, Tammy. How you doing?
Good. It's so good to have you here. Elaine and I have known each other for a few years now, and I'm so excited to have you on Work from the Inside Out. And as you know, we like to talk about people's career journeys and where they began. So take us back to some of your earlier years and how those may or may not have been formative to where you are today.
Well, I was born in a log cabin and I learned to split rails from my daddy. Now, I'm not actually that old. I guess I was a writer from an early age. I won a poetry writing contest in seventh grade, but I never thought of writing as a career for some reason. And even though I had a teacher in high school who sort of shooed me toward an extracurricular class on writing that was being given by a writer of some note, she said, "You're going to be a writer," and I said, "I'm not going to be a writer." And I think I dropped out of that class. But so I went to college and as a theater major. I went to Smith and I majored in theater, and I was going to go to New York and be a director. That was what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And to the point that after I started working at Salomon, shortly after I started working as a speechwriter, I had a college reunion, and there was a reunion book that went around saying what everybody was doing these days. And some woman came up to me, woman in my class whose name was also Elaine. So people had been confusing her for me the whole time. And they'd been coming up to her and saying, "You're working at Salomon Brothers?" And she's like, "No, I'm an accountant." So finally we ran into each other and she said, "Elaine, I read what you wrote in the reunion book. That is so funny. So tell me, what are you really doing?"
Now, did you get the job at Salomon Brothers right out of school, or? God,
no. I slogged through, so back then in the early 80s, 90s, before computers really took over,
right.
Typing was a thing.
Yes, it was.
Typing was a thing. And I had taken a typing class in the 5th grade. And after I graduated from college, it quickly became the worst thing that I had ever done because I was a woman, a young woman, and I knew how to type.
Yes.
And despite the fact that I had gone to an excellent private high school and an excellent private college, and I had this excellent, very expensive brain. Well, I was on scholarship for high school, but anyway, I found it impossible to climb out of the typing pool. And nothing wrong with secretaries. There's nothing wrong with the it's a very valuable job, but it just wasn't the job that I wanted. I had a bunch of different typing jobs. The most interesting one was I was a transcriber at the television show 60 Minutes. And so I spent all day transcribing the audio of the raw footage that they filmed, and some of it was just absolutely jaw-droppingly amazing, and I still remember it to this day. But I came very close to getting carpal tunnel syndrome from typing 8 hours a day, so I left there. So fast forward several years, I ended up at Salomon Brothers as a temp.
Okay.
And I signed. I had to get a job, and so I signed up with a temp agency. I lived in Brooklyn, and the closest business center to that was Wall Street, so I signed up with a Wall Street temp agency, not imagining in my wildest dreams that I would ever end up working there. And so they sent me to Salomon Brothers in a few different places, and I ended up in corporate communications. And they kept, instead of just typing the boss's letters, I would rewrite them. And so he appreciated that, though. And he kept trying to get me to take a full-time job. And I kept saying no, because, Wall Street, skirts every day, pantyhose, theater major. This is crazy.
Were you all this time, you said, you were slogging and sort of falling into this kind of typing, I guess, black hole, so to speak.
Yeah.
Were you aiming for being part of the theater world? Were you finding your way into that world at all, or even doing certain theater activities while you were, just trying to bring in cash? Was that?
Yeah, I did. I did a lot. I got some tech jobs. I was a good sound runner and light runner for shows. So I did some off-Broadway shows that way. And I was directing staged readings of new plays. I was part of a theater group that did that. And, that was great, but I wasn't really progressing in the professional way that I wanted to.
Yeah.
But, and I was also, by the time I landed at Salomon Brothers, I was also doing some writing for myself and trying to pitch articles and things like that. And I was doing copy editing romance novels. I highly recommend it. The only reason to read a romance novel is if you're being paid to do so. But no, I copy edited a story that was Gone with the Wind, set in pre-revolutionary China, and The Taming of the Shrew, set in colonial Williamsburg. So I learned a lot. I picked up some new vocabulary like nether lips. I always thought that was a country. But
how did you get those gigs?
I copy edited a novel for someone, a friend of a friend, and then I had experience as a copy editor. So I contacted publishers, and I was a copy editor.
You did what I always tell people to do. You used your warm network.
Yes.
Right?
Excellent. Yes. Anyway, so I was at Salomon Brothers, and they kept trying to get me to stay. And I was talking to my father at one point, and I said, Salomon Brothers keeps offering me a job. And he's like, that's great. They're a great company. You should take it. And I said, Dad, they want me to be a secretary. You didn't put me through Smith to be a secretary. He's like, they're a great company. They'll take care of you.
Yes.
So eventually, one day, my boss, the director of corporate communications, came to me and he said, Elaine, we're going to be sending out the CEO to do some public speaking, and he needs a speechwriter. Do you know how to write a speech? And this is not a visual medium, but Tammy just, her jaw dropped and her eyes widened and she looked at me, which is basically how I felt. And I had two thoughts in my mind almost simultaneously, very quickly. First thought was, this is not the kind of question that somebody's going to ask me again, right? Nobody's ever going to say, do you want to be the CEO's speechwriter? To somebody who's basically an office temp, literally an office temp.
Right. Exactly.
And the second thing I remembered was something that a theater major who had graduated ahead of me told us one day when we were all gathered at her feet looking for inspiration. She said, look, if somebody asks you to do something and you've never done it before, just say yes, because you're smart enough to figure it out.
Absolutely.
And then I thought, well, I did take a semester of playwriting in my theater major, and monologues are sort of like speeches. So I said, sure, I know how to write a speech. And that was that. I jumped from the secretarial pool to being the CEO speechwriter at Salomon Brothers. And
just like that.
So it's not really a career model that people can follow. It's not particularly replicable, but
that's the whole point, Elaine, is that it's being open to stepping into something when it shows up. And you had the relationships there. You did all the other grunt work, and just, clearly they liked you, they liked working with you, and they trusted you. So there were other elements there that were already in place for them to trust you. And you had a certain belief in yourself that you were willing to, and willing to take a risk that you could do it. So, and again, I think people have this idea that they've got to follow certain, career steps in order to get into something like that, when in fact, more often than not, people do find their way into something without it really making a whole lot of sense. So now, this is a really great story. And yes, not everybody is going to get the job of a CEO speechwriter in this way. But I think when you unpack it a little bit, there's a lot of lessons to be learned about how do you get opportunities. Show up.
Absolutely.
And say yes.
Yeah. My boss was problematic in many ways, but one way he was not problematic was that he recognized that he knew I didn't know anything about the business, but he figured that you can teach somebody about the business. You can't necessarily teach somebody how to write a good sentence. Mm-hmm. And so he was open to me, even though I didn't know investment banking from commercial banking from, I was going to say sperm banking, but that's...
You just said it. I love that.
I'm sorry. Comedy goes in threes, so I needed a third thing.
Got it. Yeah, I love that. So how did that first speech go? I'm curious.
Well, I had a really wonderful mentor that he put me with, who was a partner who had been writing the speeches before, but, he had other things to do to, make money and stuff. And so he was really supportive and helped me. But one of the first, I don't know whether this was the first speech I wrote, but my first really vivid memory is we went down to the CEO's office, the partner and me, mm-hmm. and we sat down and said, okay, you've got this speech coming up. What do you want to say? And the CEO, he unspooled all this stuff. And I'm just sitting there with my legal pad, taking notes as fast as I can. And I wrote down everything he said. And I went back to my office and I turned it into a speech, exactly what he said. And we went back to him a week later and he looked at it and he said, that's not what I want to say. I want to say XYZ. And, I knew that I had been very faithful to what he told us in the first meeting. And so that's when I realized that speakers don't always know what they want to say. And sometimes they have to see what they don't want to say in order to crystallize their thoughts.
Yes.
And I also learned that it's not about me, it's about the speaker. And that's the most important lesson that you need to learn as a speechwriter. Because, if somebody wants to say something and I don't think that it's the right way to do it, I will push back once and explain why I think they should do it the other way. But if they insist, it's not my name on the speech, it's theirs. So,
it also ties in with, I think, just a good lesson for how do you manage upwards, and when you understand that it's not about you, it's about them, it kind of frees you up to just pay attention to what they're saying and what they're, and interpreting what it is that you think they want so that you can give them what they need. And hopefully you're enjoying the work at the same time, right? So how did that all progress for you from there?
Well, after Warren blessed us with his presence and saved the company, because we were literally like half an hour away from being put out of business by the SEC.
Yeah.
And he said, no, I'll step in.
Yeah, Securities and Exchange Commission.
Right.
Yeah.
The Securities and Exchange Commission. If they don't want you to be in business as an investment bank, you are not going to be in business. So Warren came in and he saved, thousands of people's jobs.
Wow.
And so I never met him, but because he was our largest shareholder, we had an entire set of his annual reports in the office. And I knew that he was supposed to be a great business writer. And I wanted, since I was now working for Salomon Brothers, I wanted to be good at what I did. So whenever I had a minute, I would read one of his annual reports. And so then he comes and he's going to be our interim CEO. And he was in a big giant news conference on a Sunday. And I was sitting there taking notes, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, you need to go upstairs and write something. So I went upstairs to my office, and it turned out they wanted me to write a letter that was going to all of our clients that would basically say, oops, and it won't happen again. And it was going to be signed by Warren. And I didn't, if you can imagine, I know you can imagine, but maybe some of your listeners cannot imagine a world without email. But this was a world without email, and I didn't know who was going to be reviewing this letter, because everybody above my boss had basically been fired. So I put my name at the top of the page and my office phone number. I felt like it was an English assignment from high school. I put my name at the page, and I sent it off in the world. And the next day, my office phone rings, and this voice says, "Elaine, this is Warren Buffett." I
hope you were sitting down.
I was sitting down. He said, "Did you write this thing?" I said, yes, sir, I did. And he said, "It sounds like I wrote it." And I said, "Well, sir, that's my job." And that was it. That was the beginning of our working relationship, which was just amazing. And I learned so much from him just about, the power of honesty in running a business, and integrity and plain speaking. And so after that, I went out on my own. And
how soon after that?
I would say it was so Warren was with us for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say it was about a year after he left. The new CEO decided that he didn't want a speechwriter. And then it turned out that he just didn't want a girl speechwriter.
Oh, wow.
But anyway, I was on my own, and I was very happy, actually. I picked up a retainer client almost immediately, again through the warm network, through somebody who worked at Salomon Brothers and had worked with me at Salomon Brothers. Her husband was the head of communications for another big bank, and so he hired me on retainer to write for their CEO and write their annual reports. And and it just sort of rolled forward through that, and I did have to take a job after 9/11.
Yeah.
Clients got really strange about paying, as in they didn't want to. And so I had to take a job for 4 or 5 years. And then I went back out, got a retainer client, and have been on my own ever since. Actually, that retainer client lasted for 13 years.
Wow.
Longer than many marriages. And and so I am currently in the market for a new retainer client, but I'm broadening what I do now beyond, because I have a lot of value to add, just beyond writing what somebody wants to say,
right,
but actually help them shape their thinking about an idea, and broaden the discussion.
Yeah, it sounds like you're not just handing people the fish, you're teaching them how to fish now.
Yes, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
People would say to me, clients would say, we want the CEO to write an op-ed about education.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, what's the second sentence?
Yeah.
Because, education is good. Yes. Okay. That's a really short op-ed. That's not going to get published anywhere. What do you want to say? How is your view about education different than the company down the street? How is it going to change the way I, as a reader, think about education?
Yeah.
How is it going to change the way I think about your organization versus when it comes to education? So people don't really think beyond the first sentence very many times, and I am able to help them see their work in a larger frame.
Yeah, that's interesting. I could imagine that is really interesting and rewarding to, well, I actually, it sounds like you're a coach. I mean, you're helping people, even though on the surface, it looks like you're helping them craft their message. You're really helping them to see themselves and the value that they bring to their messaging, right? And I would say it's very similar to what I do. I try to help people see themselves and the value that they bring. And part of that includes the messages that they're sending, whether it's to a potential employer or a potential client or their own potential customers. And so helping people to just see themselves, because people don't know how to see themselves in what they do.
Yeah. And, getting back to the point you were making earlier about saying yes to opportunities.
Yeah.
I think there are so many, there's the data, right? The research that show that women don't say yes to things until they have 95% of the skills that are listed.
Right.
And men will say yes if they are breathing. Yeah. So it's really important to try and get an objective look at yourself. And that's one of the things that I realized early on. I saw an article in the New York Times with a headline that really spoke to me. And the article was about gardening. And you do not want me to be your gardener. Do not hire me. unless you want to kill your plants.
Okay, I'm making a note of that, Elaine.
You make a note of that. But the article, the headline was really great. It said, for the clearest view, use someone else's eye. That's what I am for people. I think what you are also. We're someone else's eye. We can see the person we're working with in an objective way that it's really, really hard to do that from the inside.
Yeah.
And you need that sometimes to be able to say yes to things.
Yeah, I like that. It's another way of saying, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
Because how often it almost sounds cliche after a while. Asking for help is not a weakness, right? And I like this way better. For the clearest view, use someone else's eye. That sounds so much more like you're more in control of what you're doing. When you talk about asking for help, it sounds like you are, in need of something.
Well, it's like it's not that I don't know anything, right? I know some things,
Sure.
but I might not know the specific thing. I might need some more specific information. I might need a different perspective on what I think I'm writing about. Generally, I find if I am trying to write something and I get stuck, what some people call writer's block. I don't believe that writer's block exists, but
I want to hear about that.
But if I get stuck, it's generally because I don't have enough information. Sometimes it takes me a day or two to realize that. But once I do, I was like, oh, okay, do some research, call some people, get some more perspectives. And that's a good plan if you're stuck in any way.
So is that your philosophy about writer's block, that it's more that you need more perspectives or you need more information, or you just okay.
No, I think that I call writer's block by another name. I call it another name, and it's a very technical name. You might want to, get a pen and write this down.
I got one right here.
You got one. Okay. Well, your listeners might want to just pull over to the side of the road if they're listening in the car and write this down. Instead of saying writer's block, I call it thinking.
I love that.
You pathologize it. If you give it a disease name, it's going to be a disease.
Yeah.
And just because other people say they have it, doesn't mean it's real.
Right.
It's only real if you make it real for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually think I totally agree with that. And I think that not only that, once you say you have it, it's almost like you reinforce it, right? Not almost, you do reinforce it. And I think it probably lasts even longer.
Yes, exactly. So it's just part of the process, Sometimes the words come out of your fingers onto the keyboard, and sometimes you need to think for a while. And sometimes you need to get up from your office and go take a walk or take a shower or play with your dog or whatever. But, it doesn't, nobody writes for, 8 hours solid. It just doesn't happen. So don't expect that of yourself, and, give yourself reasonable deadlines if that's possible. And then don't pathologize it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. So tell us a little bit about your TEDx talk and how that came about.
Oh, I am a terrible role model, Tammy.
Okay. Well, then tell us what being a terrible role model is.
No, so I saw the email that this friend of mine, Marie, in Contrera, was putting together a TEDx program, and I thought, oh, okay, well, I should apply for that. But I won't do it now because I was sort of semi on vacation. I was at a conference. I was in a really awful hotel room, and I just thought, I'll put that on in my to-do list, and I'll do it when I get home in 2 weeks. And then I was like, Elaine, just open up your computer and make a freaking video. And so I did think for a little bit about, because it was very easy for me because she had a theme, and her theme was changing the paradigm. And so I thought, okay, so what does that mean to me, right? Because you always want to hook a speech to yourself, because that way nobody else is going to give that speech.
Right.
If it's based on your experiences. So I remembered that I had read a book 30 years ago when I was a baby speechwriter that had it was a book about presidential speeches written by two women academics. And it had a really interesting way of treating the language that they were quoting. And I was like, well, that sort of changed my paradigm. So I opened up my video and I made a little video for them. They wanted a 60 to 90 second explanation of what you were going to talk about. And I didn't even write it down. I just, I did 2 or 3 takes and I sent them one that was fluid and not chopped up. And a couple weeks later, I get an email saying, we really liked your video. We want to talk to you more about your idea. And I was like, great. What did I say?
Because I didn't write it down.
I said it was out of my head. And so I went back and I looked at the video and I was like, oh, that's a really good idea. What do I mean?
I love it.
So I reconstructed, an opening and some good talking points. And I had the second interview with Marie and she booked me. But I guess the point there is that people can replicate is don't get all gummed up about what am I exactly going to say.
Yeah.
You might not need to know that right away.
Yeah.
And you can figure it out in increments as you need to. I mean, the next step Marie wanted after she booked me was she wanted an outline. I don't really do outlines, so I just wrote the speech. And I sent it to her and she was like, this is great, done. But just same way people don't apply for jobs when they're not 100% sure. I sent in the video. I knew Marie was a friend of mine. So even if it was a terrible video, she wasn't going to think I was an idiot because she knows that I'm not. But even if I did look like an idiot for those 60 seconds, that was just 60 seconds. It wasn't going to define my life.
Yeah, there was a safety in doing that. It also just thinking about, like when you were the temp, right? And you were supposed to be typing letters and then you decided to rewrite the letters. And that was probably even riskier because you were doing that in a situation where you really didn't know the people. And you didn't know what the boundaries were. You just did it because it felt right. And so it's an interesting. I think it's a very interesting point, though, that sometimes you just have to put your right foot in front of your left and keep going forward with what feels right, instead of stopping yourself and saying, "Oh, what if this is wrong?" or "What if they don't like this?" If they don't like it,
it's a first draft.
Or what? Yeah.
Rewrite it.
Right.
I will sometimes do borderline outrageous things with my first draft.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't like it, I say, okay, it says right up there, draft. I'll fix it. But most of the time they do like it. And, in one case, it won me a speechwriting award. So, but I didn't know. I decided my CEO, professional services firm, he was going to speak at a gathering of a women's conference, about women in business. And I gave him a speech or an idea for a speech at that point that used the plot of the musical The Sound of Music as a business school case study. And so we followed this troublesome employee through, the conflicts with her superiors, and that they didn't, they expected her to show up on time every day, do the same thing every day. Right. She wanted to have a looser schedule, and And every so often she'd slip out of the office, grab her guitar and run up to the Alps and sing, because this person is Maria from The Sound of Music.
Right.
And you know, there is, you think of the stereotypical stuffy businessman. Is he really going to be on board with talking about The Sound of Music and how do you solve a problem like Maria? Well, he was.
Yeah.
But if I had second guessed myself,
right,
and said, "Oh no, he's just going to want to talk about, you know, how they nurture and grow women in their," no. I mean, he talked about the business stuff later,
right,
but the opening of the speech got people really involved.
absolutely,
Kept them involved through the whole speech.
Yeah.
So you have to. I suppose it's harder if you're on staff and your mortgage depends on whether or not you're going to get fired. But you have to try and be creative. And if your people don't want you to be creative, then maybe you don't want to be working there.
Well, and I think that you do have to feel some element of safety in the situation. And at the same time, if you feel that unsure, you're on staff and you feel that unsure that you can't present a creative idea without worrying that there's going to be, some backlash, then that's a very serious issue at work. You could have also presented to him, and maybe you did, the Sound of Music scenario, or, a more, suit and tie scenario, and let him choose. You could have given him, column A and column B.
Well, that's actually what I did.
Oh, okay.
Because at that point, all I needed to do was write a summary for the organizers to be able to publicize the speech. And I hate writing those things. And I was sitting there, and the deadline was approaching, and I kept hearing, "How do you solve a problem like Maria?" I'm like, "Go ahead, try to write a speech." And then finally I recognized that it was my idea. But I did give him a more buttoned down, and fortunately he chose the good one.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. So, wow, this conversation has been full of so much great wisdom for people who are thinking about what's next for them, whether they are working, not working, just trying to think about what they want for themselves. And, literally the whole notion of work from the inside out. So I'm curious in terms of what you're working on today, or anything that's that you're looking forward to from here. I know that you are hoping to find another retainer client at this point. Tell us what's a good profile for a retainer client for you?
An organization with or without an existing corporate communications department. If they have a corporate communications department, I love to work with those people. I can train those people. I can work alongside of them. I am not into supplanting anyone.
Yeah.
Or a mid-size organization that wants to get some more visibility. My favorite clients, I always said as a speechwriter, my favorite clients were people who were smart enough to recognize good writing, but too busy to do it themselves.
Yeah.
And in the messaging world, just people who are open to rethinking what they're doing, what they're saying about themselves. Because if you're not open to rethinking your messaging, please don't hire me. We won't get along very well.
Right. Got that. And so we have that on the table. What else are you looking forward to these days?
Well, I'm taking a little bit of time for myself, which is nice. Something I don't do a lot, but that's good. I am working on actually personal writing. I'm doing personal writing. I just finished the first draft of a book finally that I've been writing for a while. And so I'm letting that sit for a week or so, and then I'll go back and start editing, and then move it down the process. And I also, submit smaller pieces of my writing to, journals and magazines. And I have a goal. I set a goal at the beginning of this year of getting 100 rejections.
I love it.
Now, obviously, I am not aiming for the rejections, but
that for the book or for anything?
No, just for personal writing. And the thing about counting rejections is when I get a rejection, I'm not sad because I get to add another tick to the list that I'm keeping. So I think I'm at 27 or 28 right now.
You better get going. I mean,
I gotta get going. I'm not going to.
Elaine, we're already, we're recording this in August. You only have 4 months left.
I know. I'm probably not going to make it. And it's those damn not rejections that are keeping me.
Really? That's, I'm a little disappointed in you, Elaine.
I got 4 yeses. I would have been close to 30 rejections.
No.
So, yeah.
So how is your personal writing? Is it of a different tone or flavor than is it, because most of the writing for your business is business writing, right?
Business writing, yeah. And someday I might figure out how to write a business book, but I'm writing at the moment memoir and creative nonfiction.
Okay.
And actually, there's a piece up on my website. We haven't advertised my website yet.
No, we haven't.
Goodness.
And it will be in the show notes too. So people will definitely have all your social media handles, your and your website there. So people will have easy access to all of that. But it is Bennett with 2 T's, 2 N's, 2 T's, Inc.com.
That's ink, I-N-K, like ink from a pen.
That's right. Remember what pens are.
Am I that old?
I know what ink is. I use pens all the time.
Well, anyway, so my website has all the business stuff and my blog and business samples and speeches, and you can watch my TED Talk and my TEDx talk. But there's also a page for my personal writing.
Oh, great.
I got published in a couple of awards that I've won. So
nice.
So yeah, it's people tell me that professional writers who have read bits of my memoir tell me that people will actually be interested in reading it. So stay tuned.
Well, I am very excited about that myself. Having been to your home, having rented your home on Cape Cod.
Where there were no plants there, right? I told the truth about not being a gardener. There was not a single plant in my home at Cape Cod until you.
I brought some. But I remember there being some information about your dad on the wall. There was some family history in the house that you left, some books about your family and some things there. And so it's going to be really interesting to read your memoir when it gets published. And I'm really excited to see where that goes. I'm looking forward to that. So, Elaine, if you could leave us, you've already left us with tons of great advice, but I'm going to ask this because I ask every guest. If you could give someone one key piece of advice as they are going through a transition, a professional transition, what would be a key piece of advice that you would offer them?
Don't apologize for the things that you've done, the work you've done in the past that might have been different than the work you're trying to do in the future, because everything you've done has created who you are at this moment. Mm-hmm. And so I remember a while back, I was asked to write a recommendation for law school for a young man who'd worked with me. And he'd worked with me in public relations, not law. And he's like, how do I tell them that I really want to be a lawyer when I haven't done lawyer things in the past?
Yeah.
Like, you've done this and this and this, and all of those skills are transferable to what you want to do at law school and beyond. So don't discount your previous experience.
Right.
Don't apologize for your previous experience. Everything you've done has created you.
That's
and
right.
You have the potential to succeed.
Absolutely. Well, on that beautiful note, positive note, Elaine, I want to thank you so much for being here today. This has been delightful.
Well, thank you. It was a lot of fun for me.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Elaine Bennett. It was so interesting to speak with her and learn about her professional journey. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources or links mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them on the blog page of my website at tammygoulerloeb.com. Just look for episode 145. Are you anticipating your next move? Perhaps you're feeling a little stuck. Hey, my book is finally coming out. Work from the Inside Out. Break through 9 common obstacles to design a career that fulfills you. It'll be out next month in November 2021 in print and digital ebook editions through my website, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and independent bookstores. You can start pre-purchasing it on Amazon right now. If you were inspired by this episode with Elaine, please share it with your friends and colleagues. And please do subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at www.workfromtheinsideout.com. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. I'd love to hear from you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.